how far in the future do we think they are?
Oh, man. Yeah, that's a tough question. The short answer is it depends on what they look like. Like if they look like you, then they're probably from a pretty close point in time in our evolutionary future. If they look like a reptile or an insect, that's probably a more distant period. And what I usually tell people is if you went back in time now, okay, with the characteristics that you have, 100 years in the past, you would look very similar to people there. Your clothes would look different. They'd be like, what is this thing that brought you here, DeLorean or a UFO or whatever? You go 5,000 years in the past, you still look pretty similar. 200,000 years in the past to the dawn of anatomically modern Homo sapiens, you look a little bit different. They have very primitive technology. Your technology looks tremendously sophisticated in relation to theirs. You go back 2 million years in the past. Now you're the one with the big head and the big eyes and the small face and the really complex technology. You are the extra-tempestrial, as I call them, or the aliens. You are that thing that we describe. So I think it just depends on when. And that's why it's so hard for me to answer that question. And
no,
many
that makes
people have
sense.
asked
It kind of blew my mind a little bit.
People have asked me that. George Norrie once made me give him an answer. I was like, I talk in the book about that very question a lot. And I said, George Norrie, I'm not going to answer that because there's a lot of factors. And then also across different periods of time, this is something we struggle with in paleoanthropology. There's also sex variation, differences between the sex. Males and females look different morphologically. Age variation. Are you talking about a 4-year-old or a 20-year-old or a 50-year-old? They all have different morphological traits. If they come from different regions, if they're sub-Saharan African or Native American or European, they have different traits. How do you account for all of those, especially in the context of something so ethereal as abduction reports, where I describe this Asian-looking or Nordic or insect-like, reptile-like creature? How do you say when they come from? I think once we have time travel technology, in the same way that once we had fire, we never stopped having fire. 1.8 million years ago, we invented fire. We harnessed the power of fire and then kept it going. In that same context, once we have time travel technology in the future, we're going to keep having it. We're going to keep that going. So at the very first time that we see those people from the very first period, there's still bias in that. Why? Say we do it in 100 years. Why would they come to now? They would look exactly like us. Why would they come to now? They already know everything about us. There's still archives, there's records. But it has to get to that point where we lose some of that information. It's where they care to come back and study us. So it just depends on who we see and from what time period. And it's so hard to answer that question because of that.
And also complicating that is the thought that, maybe they have the technology to genetically engineer themselves, right?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Or artificial. Artificial intelligence. Like what about AI?
Right.
Like some of these things might be robots who are pushed back through time to study us because it's too dangerous, or when they first start doing it, I wouldn't be that human. Like you talked about contact. Would you be Jodie Foster dropping through that thing?
I would have to have some serious dad issues like she did.
Yeah.
To be willing to
I think
go
we
through
all
that
would.
thing.
Yeah. Maybe that's what it'll take. We'll just be shitty dads so we can make a bunch of Jodie Fosters to go back through time.
I'm working on it. My kids are going to
mistreat our children for science.
Yes. That's the takeaway from this conversation.
Exactly.
Mistreat our children for science.
Welcome to the